Hi, everybody. Welcome to our discussion of marital decay. I'm sure nobody here is, well, anyway. We're happy to warmly embrace you in whatever way your partner is not. Anyway, we're going to start with some inspirational readings from some great literature of marital and relationship. I think we're going to use the word marital in a sort of overarching way to describe intense domestic arrangements. We know some people aren't married or, whatever. We all know what it means. So if we occasionally use shorthand, please forgive us. So Alyssa, would you like to start?
I'm going to start. So I'm going to be reading from Ursula Parrott's Ex-Wife. It's from 1929 and was recently republished in 2023. My husband left me 4 years ago. Why, I don't precisely understand and never did, nor, I suspect, does he. Nowadays, when the catastrophe that seemed to be and its causes are matters equally inconsequential, I am increasingly disposed to the belief that he brought himself to the point of deserting me because I made such outrageous scenes at the first mention of the possibility. Of course, during the frantic 6 months that preceded his actual departure, he presented reasons for it by dozens. I remember some of them. At times, he said that I'd lost my looks. At other times, he said I had nothing but looks to recommend me. He said I took no interest in his interests. He also said that I insisted on thrusting myself into all of them. He said I was spiritless or temperamental, had no moral sense, or was a prude. He said he wanted to marry the woman he really loved, and that once rid of me, he would not marry anyone else on a bet. In the 4 years since, I've listened to the causes given for the dismal ends of many marriages and have come to believe my husband's list is sensible as most. He grew tired of me, hunted about for reasons to justify his weariness, and found them. They seemed valid to him. I suppose if I had tired of him, I should have done the same thing. But I was not tired of him, so I fought his going ruthlessly and very stupidly. I was sure that if I fought, I would win. I've never been so sure of myself since as I was then when I was 24. No stirring of any ethical scruples about possessiveness or idea of the futility of coercing emotion complicated my efforts to keep what I wanted. At first, I think I pretended to high motives, stay for the sake of our families, and so on. Later, as I grew panicky, I experimented with argument, rage, anguish, hysteria, and threats of suicide, and refused to admit to myself until 5 minutes before he left that he really might go in spite of everything. When he finished packing, I sat, beginning to believe it. I tried to think of some last-minute miracle to manage, considered slashing my wrists so that he would have to go get a doctor, and then stay until I recovered. But I recognized in a world that had suddenly become an altogether incredible place that he might just walk out and leave me to die of the slashes. I hoped I looked devastated. I hoped I looked lovely.
I think I'm next. I chose Heartburn by Nora Ephron. I think many of you have read it. Yes, I am pandering. And I chose a famous scene toward the end, which you might know as the pie throwing scene. So this is the prelude to the actual throwing of the pie. I looked across the table at Mark. I still love you, I thought. I still look at that dopey face of yours with that silly striped beard and think you are the handsomest man I've ever known. I still find you interesting, even if right now you are being more boring than the Martin Agronsky show. But someday I won't anymore. And in the meantime, I'm getting out. I am no beauty, and I'm getting on in years, and I have just about enough money to last me 60 days, and I am terrified of being alone, and I can't bear the idea of divorce, but I would rather die than sit here and pretend it's okay. I would rather die than sit here figuring out how to get you to love me again. I would rather die than spend 5 more minutes going through your drawers and wondering where you are and anticipating the next betrayal and worrying about whether my poor, beat-up, middle-aged body with its cesarean scars will ever turn you on again. I can't stand feeling sorry for myself. I can't stand feeling like a victim. I can't stand hoping against hope. I can't stand sitting here with all this rage turning to hurt and then to tears. I can't stand not talking. I looked at the pie sitting right there in front of me, and suddenly, it began to throb.
Well, you have to say what she does.
She throws the pie at his face.
Which is good. I'm going to be less funny, but no. Oh, geez, it's not here. Excuse me. You should go, Waikiki. I've got to find.
You want me to go?
Yeah, it's just on another piece.
All right,
of paper.
I'm going to go. While she finds the piece of paper. Wants is a very short Grace Paley story, but I'm only going to read the first page because we're just trying to keep it short. Wants. I saw my ex-husband on the street. I was sitting on the steps of the new library. "Hello, my life," I said. We had once been married for 27 years, so I felt justified. He said, "What? What life? No life of mine?" I said, "Okay, I don't argue when there's real disagreement." I got up and went into the library to see how much I owed them. The librarian said $32 even, and you've owed it for 18 years. I didn't deny anything because I don't understand how time passes. I've had those books. I've often thought of them. The library is only 2 blocks away. My ex-husband followed me to the book's return desk. He interrupted the librarian, who had more to tell. "In many ways," he said, as I look back, "I attribute the dissolution of our marriage to the fact that you never invited the Berntrams to dinner." "That's possible," I said, "but really, if you remember, first my father was sick that Friday, then the children were born, and then I had those Tuesday night meetings, and then the war began. Then we didn't seem to know them anymore. But you're right, I should have had them to dinner."
Okay, I found the right piece of paper. This is Anne Carson, who is a poet who writes in prose, really. And she wrote one book called The Beauty of the Husband, which is about a divorce. And it's divided into, I think, 39 different sort of sections, which she calls tangos, because she's so out there and great. And for instance, here's number 19, tango, title. "Running your hand over it," she's talking about divorce, "to calculate its dimensions, you think at first it is stone, then ink, or black water, where the hand sinks in, then a bowl of elsewhere from which you pull out no hand." Hard to follow, but she gets you in the mood. And this is number 23, and it's about a conversation she's having with a friend, which again is a big part of marital decay or falling apart. You kind of try to thrash it out with a friend, and they say, "No, that's not good," or "No, that is good," and you have to figure out which is true. "So you say he's phoning you lately?" "Yes." "Tells you he's a better person now?" "More or less." "And what else?" "And he can't live without me?" "I saw him at a club the other night. You know, he looked alive to me." "What does he want me to say?" No, question is, what do you want him to say?" "Want him to say he can't live without me." "Well, bingo. But in a way, I can believe. Now there you go, knocking on heaven. Or feel the way I feel, like a body ripped in half, like an incomplete state of some metal in a chemical process, like a blob of scalded copper waiting to be resurrected into gold." I think that's what divorce feels like. "Don't wait for that." Figure of speech. "He still got his clothes at your house?" "Some." "Throw them out." "Can't." "You know what are the rules for this?" "No." "That's because there are no rules for this. A ship passes, there's a bit of wake and some spray, then it disappears."
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to take the perspective of the male. I'm reading from John Updike's. This is packaged by the Everyman Library as the Maple Stories. I think it was originally collected in Too Far to Go, but maybe not all of them were in there. You know, it was collected, recollected. Updike chronicled the dissolution of a marriage starting in 1956, and then they divorced in 76. And I think this is one of his masterpieces, mistress pieces, whatever. It's just because if you think about it, and we were talking about this a little before we came out, just the perception of marriage in 56 versus 76, probably versus 2026, who knows what awaits us, but it just completely different, and he chronicles it as it's falling apart and what happens to the children and everything. So I'm going to read a passage from the story that is called Sublimating, and rather than a friend, this involves a small child who will later become a larger child, but they're in the kitchen. The couple's, she's 10. The Bean, their baby, came into the kitchen. "What is Daddy eating?" she asked, looking into the empty bag for cookies. She knew Daddy as a snack sneaker. "Daddy bought himself a cabbage," Joan told her. Joan's the wife. The child looked at her father with eyes in which amusement had been prepared. There was a serious warmth that mommy and animals, especially horses, gave off, and everything else had the coolness of comedy. "That was silly," she said. "Nothing silly about it," Richard said. "Have a bite." He offered her the cabbage as if it were an apple. He envisioned inside her round head leaves and leaves of female psychology, packed so snugly the wrinkles dovetailed. Bean made a spitting face and harshly laughed. "That's nasty," she said. Bolder, brighter-eyed, flirting. "You're nasty," trying it out. Hurt, Richard said to her, "I don't like you either. I just like my cabbage." And he kissed the cool, pale, dense vegetable once, twice on the cheek. Bean gurgled in astonishment. Burgled. Her back still turned, Joan continued from the sink. "If you had to buy something, I wish you'd remembered Calgonite. I've been doing the dishes by hand for days." "Remember it yourself," he said airily. "Where's the saran wrap for my cabbage?" But as the week wore on, the cabbage withered. The crisp, plainer wound of each slice by the next day had browned and loosened. Stubbornly loyal, Richard cut and nibbled his slow way to the heart, which burned on his tongue so sharply that his taste buds, even in their adult dullness, were not disappointed. He remembered how it had been, the oilcloth-covered table where his grandmother used to snitz cabbage into strings for sauerkraut and give him the leftover raw hearts for a snack. How they used to burn his tender mouth. His eyes would water with the delicious pain. He did not buy another cabbage once the first was eaten. Analogously, he never returned to a mistress once Joan had discovered and mocked her. Their eyes, that is, had married and merged to three, and in the middle, shared one, her dry female-to-female clarity would always oust his romantic mists. I mean, All right. So I would like to turn away from these wonderful works to all of your wonderful works, but first I want to ask the question: when did you first encounter marriage, the concept of marriage breaking down in life or literature, or both? I'll go first. It was Kramer versus Kramer, and there was like a woman, a friend I had with her mom across the street. She was a divorcee. This was the late 70s. She was so cool. She had a gold lame pantsuit. She might still live in this neighborhood, but she smoked. She had a copy of Our Bodies Ourselves. She was the coolest thing. That was Marital Decay to me. It was very cool. It had a kind of Studio 54 undertone. How about you, Ada?
Family Ties. My mother was an actress in the 80s, and she, in 1983, was in season 1 as the divorced friend of Elise.
Amazing.
Thank you. And I just rewatched it today, and in my memory, she's divorced forever, and in reality, she's only divorced she's only splitting up with her husband in the last 5 seconds of episode 19. And because, but you're so relieved because this guy is so terrible for 2 whole long episodes. And then finally she leaves, and then they get a postcard at the very end, right before the credits. And she is in Greece having the time of her life. And she says, "Greece is very hard to pick up, but I'm not."
Amazing.
So flamboyant divorcees.
Very happy. And so I was 7, and I used to run lines with her. So that was like my first introduction, was this.
So it sounded sort of glamorous, because I think the first, I'm older than you guys, so it was in the early 60s, a divorced person, or where I saw it from was a family in which the parents were divorced, was like, it's as if their house had burned down. I mean, it was scary, or it was sort of an unknown territory, right? It was just still kind of unheard of, And so I can think of 2 people who were divorced. There was one who had 4 children, and she just divorced her husband. I think they kind of both had money, so that was probably feasible. And then a little later, there was a woman who divorced her husband, and I was in school with one of her sons, and she went to work in Boston, which that was unheard of. Like, she went and got a job. This is 40 minutes away in New England. Cut to 20 years later, after my mother died, my father married her.
Wow.
So she was an iconic divorcee. Yeah.
I don't think I can follow that.
Stop that.
I think divorce was very hush-hush in my community. It was hard to talk about it. If I had a family member who was divorced, I probably didn't know about it until like a few years later. Or if I had a best friend, I remember a childhood friend, her parents were divorced and the mother had remarried. It was kind of always hushed, and it was sort of like the stepdad is the new dad. It was just different. I think sometimes in Chinese culture, divorce is not necessarily this thing that it's not flamboyant, as if the word, the community that I came from, that was a really hard thing to think about. It really did burn down the family in a way. And so you pretended, I think, for some families that it didn't really happen. And so it's a complete erasure of a person and also time, right? It's like the dissociative thing. It's like it wasn't empowering. You didn't learn any lessons. It just didn't happen. It's sort of like an annulment. And so I think that's how I thought about divorce, was that there's this fatal flaw. Like, it's Greek, like a fatal flaw, then you forget it all, then you annul it, and then we start all over, right? So it was something very serious, but I don't think it was ever something that was like very talked about openly.
I think that by the time I was kind of an early adolescent, all of my friends lived with single mothers. Wow. And I think about it, I think about when I was very little, my mother had a friend named Mary Jane Creeley, whose name I remember.
Where did you grow up, Alyssa?
In Rhode Island. And she was, sort of the first divorcee that I sort of remember being cognizant of. And she lived with her son in an apartment building, which I thought was sort of a scandal. It seemed like a scandal to live in an apartment building. And, I grew up in a rural area. But then as I got older, it started to symbolize a world without men somehow. There were never fathers around. All of my friends had mothers that did things like, my best friend's mother worked in the carnival and her father was never around. And another of our friends had a mother that worked at Burger King and the father was never around. And this sort of itinerant existence, I think, because there was not, maybe there, I didn't see the divorce decrees, but there didn't seem to be an awful lot of financial support. So it was really a kind of, to encounter it as a child of parents that are still married, it seemed like such a vulnerability to me. It didn't seem glamorous. There was no LeMay. But it was a lot of sort of.
It's probably early on. You needed to be rich if you're.
Well, right. This is the early '80s, and when I'm thinking of it, which is maybe if we look at sort of economically how divorce begins to be more widely deployed, it's certainly in tandem with women joining the workforce, but really quite a lonely recollections I have of the idea of being divorced.
let's turn to how you all have been exploring, if not explicitly divorce, the subject of sort of marital rot, let's call it, or in your own work. Like what I always marvel that these topics are so enduring, given that, polycules or whatever, like shouldn't we be writing about communes in space, or like why are we still, what attracted to you about this beautifully time-worn topic?
So my book, it's called Crush. It's a novel about a woman, and she's like pretty happy in her marriage, and then her husband's a little bit like, maybe we should try to open up our marriage just a little bit, and she immediately falls madly in love with another man, and then gets very strategic trying to figure out how to keep both of them. And I think maybe a lot of Generation X coming out of these Kramer versus Kramer lonely household and divorces said, well, we can outsmart this, right? Like, we saw all this devastation, and there is a way for us to keep this family together in some form, and maybe it involves some kind of, open marriage-ish situation. Maybe it involves having, the stepdad, and the husband living in different houses next door. Maybe, and I don't know, I see so many, you laugh, but I've seen so many combinations of this among my friends, and that, and that's in a lot of the books that are out right now. And I think it is this effort to not blow everything up in the way that maybe, are the generation that of our parents sometimes did.
Yeah, there's the Southern writer Barry Hannah had said that he talked about how there's music in everything in life, and the writer sort of hears the music and writes about it. He said, but there is no music in the death of a child. And he said, and there is no music in divorce. Because it's pretty grim. When Ada said she was going to be reading from Heartburn, it made me sort of go back and start reading some Nora Ephron, who we could just have a seminar on Nora Ephron's views on divorce, because she's pretty good about it. But she said, marriages come and go, but divorce is forever, right? It keeps on going. And she said she got divorced in the 70s when she said we were all like those Jewel Pfeiffer cartoons, women, dancing through the daisies. She goes, we were very irritable, and we found our husbands very irritating. And you could divorce, like suddenly you were able to divorce. So maybe the gold lame people sort of started the trend. But, and we were talking about this back there before, that in terms of literature, there's certainly, marriage has been being explored forever in literature, but divorce hasn't really been around until the last sort of 100 years. So it's kind of a new subject. And I think you're right that it's sort of changing decade by decade. There's kind of a new attitude towards it. Now it's an option. It's, didn't used to be an option. I was going to read something from Anna Karenina, and so I went back and I thought, perfect. They never get divorced in Anna Karenina.
That's true. She just died.
Yeah. Well, no, she leaves him. She leaves him, and she has another child with Vronsky, her lover, but neither of them can bear to get a divorce. It's just so frowned upon, right? Kind of not an option.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting in a lot of the readings that there is this idea of the marriage and the divorce bookending time in this way that's kind of encapsulating, and it's like the cadaver somehow, right? It's like the clothes that you have to get rid of, or the $32 library fine, or what happens with the pie before and after. So the series of sort of temporal sort of musings that really are about sort of carving out the thing that's become the disaster in your life. And I think that's why when I started, I write about my ex-husband quite, sort of less so. I used to write about him a lot, and I always thought that it was a way to sort of contend with this part of my life that felt like it was a waste of time somehow. Like, how do you manage that wasted time?
Like, if a marriage ends, it means it failed.
With no children,
That's always
it was the fit, and it was like a dead body in my life somehow.
Yes, well, that's another. I won't keep quoting Nora Ephron endlessly, but she did say that there's people always say, oh, it's better for the children if you get divorced, you don't want them fighting. And she's like, no, there's nothing about divorce that's good for children. Yeah. They learn that if I'm going to see one parent, I'm not going to be seeing the other. It's like an early adjustment to have to make, right? So that's a whole other level of kind of subject, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm interested when you're talking about, okay, it's existed for 100 years, basically, this thing, but I always marvel, and I marveled at this in all of your work that I've read, how you integrate, like, to me, just Find My iPhone and phones in general and texting and everything, technology has completely transformed the marital landscape. I mean, this Maples series, like, half the time you're like, just locate him or whatever, like the phone rings in the empty room, nobody answers it and all that stuff. And so I wondered how in your work does it even occur to you like, oh, this is a challenge, or do you know what I mean? Like it kind of flattens, I think, certain possibilities, right? Like Ada, I feel you had to go a little more interior in a way. Well, you talk, don't.
No, I want to hear what you think. Yeah, so I think it is true that there is so much more talking, like so much more connection, and yes, thinking and talking and being involved now that wasn't true in like it would maybe be easier to be married if you only saw them like an hour a day and didn't talk to them all day.
Very romantic.
And and you didn't live as long. Like it's just it's a little tougher now. I don't know. What do you all think?
Well, the book that I've just written, it's called Don't Be a Stranger, and it's about an older woman, she's 53, who has a single child who's 8. She's divorced, she's a year into her divorce. So it's more about the sort of, she's trying to gather herself together after divorce and being single, the combination of all that. And she ends up sort of, that's the setup, kind of falling for this not quite random, but a much younger musician who she has this sort of intense and, ill-fated and obsessive affair with. And that would not have happened if there wasn't such thing as texting.
And there's so much comedy in their different texting styles.
That's right.
And how she's reduced and made younger, or not reduced, but she's sort of reduced to his level of and waiting,
Well, she's learning a new language because she's older. It's like, what? A thing? And,
and
she got her first phone.
Whatever.
This is in like it's in the sort of mid-aughts, right? And, so it's completely, I won't say, the basis of their relationship, but it wouldn't have happened otherwise, yeah.
So it's nice to know that technology can actually be generative in fiction and not just like, make it irrelevant, I guess.
Yeah.
And you've got 2 totally different families, like coming, just complete culture clash. And it's funny, I was also listening, I read your book on paper, but I also listened to the audiobook.
Good audiobook.
And I was like, wow, the accent. Like I did not. This is always a problem for me with audiobooks. No offense to whoever read it, because they were great. But when the accent doesn't match up with what I was imagining the character to be, I mean, I guess it's like making a book into a movie. Anyway, so that's
the question.
No, you're right. The question was about technology, which I think in your book doesn't figure quite so much. It's modern. It's.
Well, I think to maybe the question of the divorce plot, marital rot, or whatever, decay. I mean, divorce is something in my family was pretty rare. I think in my generation above us, I'm a child of immigrants. Like for an immigrant population, divorce is really hard because if you divorce, the woman usually has to go back, right? And so you're deciding to go back to your home or go back to whatever, you have no resources. So divorce requires a lot of power and resources, money, and kind of like just confidence to do it and be able to live on your own. And for some people who are just starting in this country, that's almost impossible. I think my generation is the first generation who's actually going to encounter this. I've been with someone for 15 years, and this year we had two couples just separate after 15 years and divorce, and that was just kind of shocking for me. And so I think I'm interested when I'm writing about this idea of a really, really strained marriage, because that's essentially what I witnessed growing up, is a really, really strained marriage that probably could have ended at many points but did not. And this idea of we're just going to get to the end of this hallway however way possible. And so this idea of like just get through it, this tolerance, compromise. And it's like the crucible. Like I feel like marriage is the crucible. And I'm in there with my parents. And so like when I write like marital problems, I think about Paula Fox's desperate characters. I think about August Osage County. I think about these people should not be married, but here we are, and it's a disaster. And that's what I've always thought marriage was, is like, you can't get out of it. This is it. We're burning down together. And that's what I love about it, is like, why not? It's painful. So I think that's what I like about it, because I think if, like you said, divorce is final. Like you divorce someone and that's it, whereas
you can always marry them again.
That's true.
That's what she did.
You did. How did that go?
Do you recommend it?
What's the definition of insanity? The result is the same, but it's better. It's, I think it's like, there's a certain theory of humor that if you tell the same joke twice, it's funnier the second time.
Right.
It's sort of the same with marriage.
Yeah.
It's sort of...
There's a whole song, second time.
Yeah. Second time's a failure too.
We're not going to
It's
sing.
fun, after I married and divorced the same person twice, I had a child with a total stranger. So I got pregnant on like a third date, and we lived together not as a couple for 7 years. And it was like sort of a pantomime of a marriage, I guess, because for the kid, and then he got someone else pregnant on a second date, and has but we have this. It's a very modern arrangement. We do our holidays together. He has a daughter, so my son has a sister, and it was an unusual way to negotiate it, but it was the strangeness of that relationship was far preferable to the devastation of my marriage, for sure. Marriages, for sure.
There's an incredible freedom to like making your own domestic arrangement, and it's not, it's not Hester Prynne anymore. It's just, and thank goodness. But that leads me to another question or thought, which is just, how do you all decide? Like, there's this incredible intimacy that you're all able to conjure, and yet you all had to or did decide to sort of, you let in other characters, like you alluded to the friend in your reading, or in your novel The Parents, the two sets of in-laws are very, and I guess in Updike you got the kid or whatever, and like, how do you settle on these sort of tertiary characters, and how do you find them? Like, what, I don't know. Tell us about your process.
Well, you have to, I don't know who said it, some wise person. Even if you want your work to be sort of have the timeless, themes, that the characters have to be in a world that's recognizable, right? And I'm always amazed how in movies, we accept it, there's always like 3 characters in a movie, and you're like, no, there's so many more people in a person's life, right? So even if you're talking about a very intense relationship, in order to really want to believe that these are characters in a world, you want them to have their, close friend, or their sort of friend they just meet, or the person who says the one thing that really gets through to them, as opposed to the other, That's all. It's really to keep up the texture of life. In my book, it was just going to be a short little novel about a love affair. And it took, 11 years to write. And I wrote it out and I did the whole background of the lover. And then I did it, and I went into the marriage and how it fell apart and where she was. And then you just think, I don't know.
It's almost like
clear it away
to your novel for a time.
Oh, yeah. Now I'm divorced. No, I'm not. But yeah, it's an instinctive thing, right? Like how many people you can fit.
So my last 4 books were nonfiction, and so I'm new to your world, and I couldn't get over it. Like, you can just make people say anything you want. So like, when I wrote a memoir, I wrote it like while I was living it, and it was about my father. It was called Also a Poet, and he was ill, and and he had been given 6 months to live, and so I kept trying to get the final scene, not that he would die, but that he would say something nice to me. And so I kept trying to like elicit that like beautiful closing moment where he'd be like, "I'm proud of you," and he would not do it. Like, and I was like, "For the book, just say something nice for the book." And then in writing fiction, you can just do it. You can make them say the nice thing. I mean, it's incredible. So, and all my novel friends are like, "Yeah, we know. You can."
I'm just really curious about because to me that
in-laws,
was the in-laws. Like I've never read a novel quite like yours where there's actually this sort of symmetry and these 2 sets that are, it's almost like a sextet or of and the dog, the
dog. Well, I think parents is how you learn a lot about marriage and how relationships work and how families work. And then gender roles and things. And in Rental House, the 2 in-laws couldn't be more different. They have a lot of commonalities, but they're just very different. And I think I just wanted to use that to kind of explore. I don't have any idea what the modern American family is. Like, what is the blended family? What is the interracial couple? I don't have any answers to these questions, but it's pretty difficult sometimes to meld families together and ideas together. And I think to coexist, I teach undergrads and all they do is cancel people. But I'm like, you really cannot cancel your parents. I'm sorry, that's just not gonna happen. And I see these articles like, people should stop talking to their parents. That's never gonna happen. I was not raised like that, right? Like, so there's certain people in your life you cannot cancel, and no matter the disagreement, they are in your life and you chose to like be there. And so I think this idea of marrying the family is entirely true, but you're not just marrying the family, you're marrying the culture, you're marrying their values, you're marrying everything that built this person that you love, and sometimes that builds so many levels of resentment. I mean, it's incredibly hard. We went through this election, I went through 2016 election. I'm like totally numb, right? At this point, my in-laws can say whatever to me. I'd be like, okay, cool. Let's move on, right? Like, I'm just totally numb to this. But I think that's how people coexist. There's like no glorious solution.
No, I suppose not.
But it is interesting to see how it evolves. Yeah. I mean, I've been married twice. I didn't know we were going to get into personal things here, but it does.
We love it.
Well, I mean, I don't like to, so what am I doing? But it's an example of like what's happening right now, because that's sort of what we're talking about. I've been married twice, and I'm close to both of my ex-husbands. I mean, the most recent one is the father of my daughter, and who's here in the audience somewhere. We won't put it. And I have Christmas morning with him and his first wife and their 3 children, who are my daughter's siblings. And then we're at Thanksgiving together. And then my first husband, which was the sort of, crash and burn marriage, when my daughter was looking at colleges in California, we stayed with him and his wife. It's like, I felt like when I'm not as sticking with it as you, Waikiki, but I felt like when I got married, I'm marrying this person. Like, I may divorce you, but I still married you. Like, I meant it when I said a lifelong relationship.
And the family
right?
keeps going, right? Like the marriage is over, but the family, you can't get away
even
from
without
family.
children. The first husband I didn't have children with.
Mm-hmm. But there's still family to you.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
And yet, aren't there aspects of marriage literature, or marital decay literature, domestic, that I do find a little shop-worn, such as, for example, the put upon housewife. You know, she does everything. She cooks. She takes care of the kids. She's just exhausted. He never does the laundry. You know, whatever. Is there anything like that repulses you, or that you try to avoid, or I don't know? Am I the only one who feels this way? That's just like too much, or you know that.
Well, it's a cliche.
That's what
I mean.
That's
so,
the word.
So the cliche is just like, wait, what does that feel like, or what's that like for this person, right?
Right. I mean,
but
I
it's
think the worry,
real,
when you're
like
writing,
all cliches.
right?
They have
When
a
you're
good-
writing about domestic stuff, especially as a woman, I mean, I was noting that. You know, like in the past, of course, like men sort of dominated, you know, most novels. But I was recalling that Updike was sort of stigmatized for his novels not being sort of like big subjects about the world, and especially now that we're in a very transformative time for the world. Yeah, I just wondered how, like, I don't even think chick lit should be stigmatized, but I just wonder if when you're writing, you're conscious of this topic as a feminine topic, and what you think about that.
I think those marriages fail because they're boring, and I think it's as fatiguing to read about it as it is to live it. That sort of drudgery is so boring.
But I like
That's the problem.
I like an exhausted heroine, and I like her liberation. I think it makes me root for her. What I don't like is the tropes of the marital advice, like everybody's supposed to agree on, like don't go to bed angry, which is terrible advice, right? You should always go to bed angry. It's almost always better in the morning.
Don't
right?
talk about it. Yeah.
Well, no,
Wait
you can talk
till
about it the
tomorrow.
next day when you've had coffee and slept a full night.
I don't like going to bed angry. I don't know.
Well, so that I think we might almost be at question time. Can we take some questions from the audience? Would anyone like to pose some questions to our author?
Or share
their own stories of
personal.
marital decay. This is a safe, very safe
Propose
space.
to someone.
It is being live streamed, but don't let that stop you from sharing.
Oh, and I'm not going to give you a mic. You're just going to have to project.
We'll repeat.
There's someone right there.
I would like to. Yes.
I'm very young. I'm 23, and I've obviously never been married. So, do you think I should get married, or do you think I'm destined to fail?
Is the proposed spouse here so we can vet them?
He doesn't exist. Do you think I'm gonna get married?
Do you think marriage is good? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. The question is, should they get married?
No, she doesn't have anyone. That's my daughter asking. Okay. So if you're asking, is marriage a feasible thing? I mean, I have three sisters and three brothers. And my three sisters are 1, 2, 3 very happily married. They have really strong marriages. They have 3, 4 children, you know. So I'm just the odd one out. I'm sorry, my darling's daughter. But I think good marriages, and I have friends who have good marriages, and I think they manage it. It depends if it suits you. And if you can find someone who's on the same page. I think that's the really important thing. And sometimes in marriages, you're on the same page for 10 years, and then one of you goes to another page. And then it's the end of the marriage. It's not a failure, I don't think. It's a failure if you're not on the same page and you try, or, you know, it's...
You know, one thing we haven't discussed tonight that just occurred to me is the astonishing return of the trad, or emergence of the trad wife. I don't know if anyone in this room read there was a story in my newspaper, the New York Times, about a new magazine called Evie.
Yeah, I read that
and
article.
It was a very popular article.
That really scared me. That confused me.
Wait, what was it? I'm catching me up.
I was so confused by that article.
I'll summarize. Evie is a magazine, and that in itself is it's a print magazine, which is itself, we can all attest, is quite extraordinary. And it's funded, I think, by Peter Thiel a bit. And anyway, it's a magazine that puts forth the notion that women actually aren't happy, being girl bosses or like going all out in their careers, and that in fact it's time to admit that staying home and pleasing your husband is, where it's at, and that you'll be happier and your children will be happier and all that. And it's, it does pay lip service. This is the hardest thing, whatever. Anyway, discuss. Because the thing is, like, it's not
surprising.
It's not like the whole article. It's not like every word of what the Evie editor said seemed wrong and bad. It just was such a strange, wrench of the wheel from everything. I feel that almost every person on this panel were discussing, you know what I mean? It was like yet it seemed an insight into where we are right now as a culture in a country, or at least the ascendant. So I'm just putting that out there for you and the audience, because I was quite.
Everyone should read this. I sent it to all of my friends as a gift letter because I was so confused. I mean,
what about it?
I'm confused.
What confused you?
Because it was like, what's the difference between feminism and femininity and softness and, and I teach at Barnard, which is an all-girls school, and they're always like, female empowerment. I have no idea what the female empowerment is at this point. And I think that article perpetuates this idea of the mixed message that women get all the time. Like, you can be a business owner, own 2 companies, be gorgeous, and also perpetuate this idea that being a traditional housewife is fine, even though you're not one. And don't waste your money on, like, they weren't college grads, don't waste your money on college education, but also live this glamorous lifestyle, which is that's such a low percentage. And I just think teaching girls, like, the messaging for masculinity is so much more consistent than being a girl. Like, femininity, I'm so confused, so I don't know what to teach girls anymore. And I don't know what to say to them other than just try to out-earn your husbands. I think that's the end of the game. Because I read that article and I don't even know what the thesis is. Like, what's the takeaway?
I think it's this proposition that this reclamation of traditional values is actually transgressive. And I think that that's the appeal for young people. I think it's the same appeal. There's this sort of, I won't say like a mass movement of young people going back to church, but there are a lot of young people going to church as though it's some kind of subversive gesture against the morals of their Gen X parents. It's
becoming Catholic, even,
exactly.
Converting to Catholicism.
Exactly. Yeah. As though traditionalism in the face of a generation that fought against or sort of gave up against these values is sort of punk rock. I think it's
just coming back.
Well, I think it stems, I think there's a lot of it that comes from the Red Scare girls, where there was this sort of chic that was spun on, sort of right-wing adjacent politics and traditional domestic value systems, because it's not chic and it's not particularly interesting to most of us. I think there's some thrill in that gesture as transgression.
Well, and it's the swinging back and forth, yeah.
I made it a free-for-all. I apologize.
Go ahead.
With my introduction of Evie.
I haven't read the article, but I do have a question. What would Peter Thiel know about it?
Exactly.
Very good question. And why? Right.
He'd be a man.
I think
that's what he knows about it.
I think he thinks it's a good investment. I don't know.
So there is, I think, a big trend right now And my father used to say, I didn't of course follow his advice, as we don't do often, is that, it's one thing to your doctor, one thing to be married for sex and love and lust and all of that stuff when we're in our 20s, but to marry for common interests. Because when you get to our age, if we don't have common interests, then you are going to go like this.
Yeah.
So it's really, I would love to teach our generation that to marry for common interests and be true to who you are. And from there, find somebody who you can do the long road with.
Do you want my job? You can have my job at Barnard.
Yes, you can help tell the.
Please take my job.
Yeah. Do we have to repeat the question?
Sorry.
So the question was about grade divorce and divorce as empowerment, and about this idea of like marrying yourself or like being true to yourself. There's a Dolly Parton quote about the goal in life is find out who you are and do it on purpose. And I think for students or for anybody, I think it's like, where is that going to lead you, right? And I think the trad wife thing and all of it is like this illusion that you're gonna solve your humanity and the basic need to do that work of like the Dolly Parton thing by like just giving yourself over to a marriage that's a certain way that's been prescribed, or to even to a divorce that's like has this gold lame fantasy that isn't consistent with what you want. Like what is it that is actually true to you? And that is what to go for, regardless of whether it involves getting married, getting divorced, never marrying, having kids with somebody.
The true to you phrase that's really hard.
It's really hard, but that's the goal,
even
right?
know what.
Yeah.
That's the lifelong exploration, right? It's not like, oh, I got it now. I know who I am, or whatever. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, I like it.
It goes.
It's perfect.
It goes on forever, right?
Yeah.
And I think with the epigraph of this book I just wrote is from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it says, "A person to me is a great event and hinders me from sleep." And so it's about the effect that people have on each other. I mean, a person can enter into your life. It's like you wrote about in your book, and you've got our chemistry with people is just fascinating. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a how-to person. I'm like, and we should do and do the thing as my daughter knows. I'm just interested in trying to describe this, this strange, mysterious alchemy that happens.
And all of your writing has moved me in that way. Like, it's funny because, Waike, you write about scientists, and that yet the moment where they meet at a party, I just teared up because it's what you're talking about. It's romance, it's chemistry. People haunt us, outside the marriage. You can't explain it. And I think it's what keeps us all going. But I'm going to turn over to you.
So I'm about to turn 30, which means all of my friends are starting to settle down. I went to 5 weddings last year.
In New York? That's young.
Exactly, and I just ended a relationship, so I had
Welcome.
You're in the right place.
Yes.
So it made me think, to my friends, I'm like, what is it that has made me go, like, yes, this is the time, I'm settling down, this is the person. I know children plays a big part of it. I personally do not want to have children, so I never thought of that as being a factor, but, at this age, late 20s, early 30s, what is it that kind of clicks in your head to think, I need to settle down with the person?
That's such a good question. I mean, I've seen. I think the thing that's changed in my lifetime. I don't know if you all have observed this, but I no longer feel like people. There is, especially with like climate change and just all the horrors. It just doesn't seem. It seems a lot more freeform. Which, I mean, regardless of what's going on in your friend group, which I don't know, because every microcosm, you all describe these sort of microclimates where people have different mores, but in general, it feels like there's a lot less direction about. Now, I don't even know. It just feels like people make their own decisions and may not and still be happy, if they don't get married. They might just decide, it's not for them. Yes. Oh. Questions are blooming like flowers. Yes.
So what I've been thinking about is a lot of my friends were like younger, really interesting
Maybe he should cook. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, do you feel like this is a point in time where this is a divergent point of, like, the likelihood that interesting women are going to actually get married? This is not worth our time unless the government
But it has to do with people. I mean, the institution of marriage, the only thing that's changed in the last 100 years, really, is that it's not a lock-in, like it still is in your culture. You can get out. That's the only thing that's changed. People are people. I mean, there are men and female roles and stuff. I would say to you, how do you just know if you want to, and someone else will have this reason for it, and someone else will have that reason. And if you're lucky, because it has to do with luck, you find someone who's on your same page, doesn't want children either, or whatever, right?
Just to repeat the questions for the live stream too, and because you two just sorry, I'm very rules oriented.
No,
Very good, Ada.
Moderate me.
So turning 30, 5 weddings last year from friends. How will I know when it's time to settle down? Sort of similar question. Maybe the two of you should go hang out and have a drink afterward. Question was, is it time for interesting women to stop getting married? Essentially,
yes.
And are we at kind of a pivot moment where you don't have to, and do we still want to? So they're both, I just think, really good questions. And I think the fact that everybody's asking them, and I think the fact that women are talking to each other about what does it take? Where is the bar where it is going to be something that one wants to find a partner? I mean, I do think finding like love and having the chemistry and the alchemy and the same page and all that it's still something a lot of people are going to continue to want forever, probably. There's this J.R.R. Tolkien letter that he wrote to his son, talking about why marriage is so good, and he said you need a companion in shipwreck.
It's true.
But it's also such an increasingly baroque situation you have in terms of dating, because everything is so, you live in like a depopulated landscape in a way, right? Because everything's digital. Yeah. So there's this sort of lack of, the sort of haptic qualities of dating, because you're meeting people on a screen, which I think complicates it.
Don't worry, Peter Thiel is looking out for all of you.
He's got
Anyway,
you.
just as we can't, not all marriages last forever, so do not all panels last forever. So I want you all to proceed to the lobby, immediately whip out your credit cards and buy, or cash, and buy each of these incredible books. And you might, if you drift back here, you might even be blessed with a personalized signature, but I can't guarantee that. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.